think we will start. Good afternoon from Fairfax, Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C. My name is Bernard Markowitz. I'm the Managing Director of Decision Analysis Partners. I'd like to welcome you to our first postal webinar of 2013. The topic today is the adaptable post concept. Before we start, I would like to say a word of introduction about our company, Decision Analysis Partners. We are an independent consulting firm active in logistics, supply chain, telecommunications, and the Postal Service. In the last 5 years, we have delivered over 60 projects in all areas of the postal industry, from operational improvements, sorting center design, network simulation and optimization, market and financial analysis, tender development, and labor planning and analysis. We have scheduled 8 free postal webinars for this year, and we invite you to join us every month at this hour. Our next webinar will be on postal revenue leakage, and it will take place 3 weeks from now on March the 21st at the same time. And I hope you will be able to join us then. Our presentation will last about 35 to 40 minutes. If you would like to ask a question during the webinar, please use the chat window, which can be pulled up from the pop-up menu at the top of your screen. We will collect the questions at the end of the presentation, and we will answer them together at the end. We will make available both the recording of today's webinar and the slides that were used in the presentation, and we will send you an email with links to these documents. You'll be free to share them with friends and colleagues by forwarding the links. All right, let's get underway. The information revolution that is taking place in logistics and in the supply chain now enables retailers and manufacturers to adapt their supply chains as a function of demand. Key ideas in retailing are omni-channel retailing and distributed order management. These new supply chain practices leverage the information available to significantly reduce costs, such as warehousing, for instance. Postal enterprises have typically been slow to respond to changes, in part because of the complexity of their network and operations, because of a lack of information sometimes, but often because of a lack of skills and tools within the enterprise. The presentation today will be divided in 3 parts. The first part will look broadly at variability in the postal network and what strategies can be adopted to address each type of variability. In the second part, my colleague Pierre Cacha will present 5 concrete initiatives that can be undertaken by postal operators to address variability in the postal network. Finally, we will summarize the presentation and propose a few next steps to improve the adaptability of the network. We begin on this slide with key mail figures obtained from the U.S. Postal Service's annual report. As you can see, mail volumes declined by 5% between 2011 and 2012. At the same time, the number of addresses to which mail can be delivered increased by 654,000, approximately. The third number at the bottom of the column is the number of mail pieces distributed in average to each address every day. As you can see, this average number decreased from 3.7 in 2011 to 3.5 in 2012. which is a decrease of about 6%. Long-term declines can usually be forecasted with good levels of accuracy. This figure is projected to drop to around 2.8 pieces by 2020. As you will see on the next slide, we consider these yearly changes to be long-term changes. The changes taking place affect the processing network as well as the delivery network. Adapting to these changes is very important in order to maintain the network's economic viability. We will show you later in this presentation some ways to mitigate these forces. The postal enterprise is confronted with different types of variability, which include longer-term, multi-year trends, as we discussed on the previous slide. As we know, the decline in mail volumes is due mainly to substitution with electronic mail and to the current economic situation. Seasonal variability is usually caused by holidays, such as Christmas in a number of countries, or marketing campaigns conducted by large businesses. For example, before the beginning of the school year or during traditional sales seasons in the United States, we have large mailing campaigns. Day-of-the-week variability generally is caused by weekends on both the postal operating side and the commercial mailing side. Mailers tend to have preferences for when to issue mailings. For instance, mailers chose to issue remittance mail on selected days of the week. Mailings, handled by large mailers, which can be private or government, are another common source of variability. Large mailings create volume spikes, and sometimes these large mailings end up on different days that they may have been planned for or at different levels of pre-sort than what was anticipated. Lastly, random failures occur, and the ability to address the impact of these failures on operations is limited. Congestion or mechanical failure may affect transport. Machine breakdowns may also create the inability to meet operating plans and scheduled transport. Each type of variability potentially represents wasted resources. Addressing this variability by becoming more adaptive means significant potential savings for postal operators. In many cases, postal enterprises are not equipped to adapt to the changes around them. The distribution network, for instance, is seldom changed until major shifts in volume occur. Why is that? Postal networks are typically complex, and the implication of changes in one part of the network on the rest of the network are not easy to estimate or predict. Another reason is that data may not be available. Some posts without automation solutions do not have accurate counts of the mail they carry at each origin or destination, by class of mail, for instance. Sometimes only summary data is available on a monthly basis. Our observation is that mail operators often do not maintain a culture of production planning and control. This culture would leverage the existing data to constantly keep looking at adapting the postal network and its operation. The solution to the inability to adapt, what we call here a static network, is often to overbuild processing and transport capacity, provide more equipment than is necessary. Essentially, the equipment is built for peak capacity. Too much transport capacity scheduled at the wrong times with low utilization. A workforce that is not aligned to the changing demands for workload. Distribution routes and sort plans with unnecessary handling, resulting in too many underutilized trays and containers. Delivery routes that were designed a long time ago for different mail profiles. This slide shows the high degree of interdependency between the various elements that make up the postal network. That is why the modern postal enterprise must adopt a network-centric approach in order to become more adaptive. Today, more often than not, postal enterprises operate within silos. Sales and marketing, responsible for mailers, processing plants and sort centers, transportation, or delivery. In an adaptive network, the sort center will adapt its operations based on mail volume handled by mailers and based on the capacity of letter carriers to deliver the mail within the service standards. This balancing act is becoming increasingly necessary as postal enterprises adopt delivery schedules that vary by day of the week. For instance, some operators deliver certain mail products every other day. One of the keys is to use all the information available and apply analytical methods to adapt the network and cut costs. How can we adapt to cut costs? As you will see, we will get increasingly specific about how we can turn a static network into an adaptable post. In this table, we have taken the different types of variability and classified them into three categories, shown by the darker blue shading the medium blue and the light blue at the bottom. At the top, addressing long-term variability requires adapting the network by adding, cutting, or relocating facilities, reconfiguring sorting equipment, redesigning the distribution and delivery networks, and even changing labor agreements, which, as you probably know, takes a lot of time. The variability caused by seasonal fluctuations, day-of-the-week fluctuations, or fluctuations caused by large mailings can be managed by using tactical initiatives such as adapting distribution rules, implementing methods to manage demand peaks, introducing yield management techniques, which we will present later, and collaborating with third parties to help absorb variations in demand. Finally, any network or operation is subject to seemingly random failures. Responding and adapting to these events requires what is referred to as real-time situational awareness, which may lead to the activation of contingency plans and, if possible, adjustments in mail distribution in near real-time conditions. The adaptable post spans many areas. As you can see on this slide, there are a number of different techniques that can be used for addressing variability and improving the adaptability of the network. For long-term variability issues, some preferred methods include network modeling and business analytics, which enables to identify long-term trends. Network modeling enables planners to simulate costs and service implications resulting from changes in mail traffic in the infrastructure or in distribution policies. Yield management planning, distribution planning, capacity planning, and labor planning are techniques that are more directed to the medium-term variability. Contingency planning is designed to help manage near real-time events. On the box below, we identified a number of initiatives that can be undertaken once the planning work has been done. In red, you can see the names of 5 initiatives that we will detail in a couple of minutes one by one. I just want to point out a couple of other initiatives, of course, on the left. Network rationalization means significant changes in the network infrastructure, asset leasing, and third-party collaboration, which are means of reducing capital expenditures that may be devoted to handling peak mail flows, for instance. All of these initiatives require the implementation of decision support and forecasting tools, as well as the internal skills in the organization necessary to plan and implement them. We will now move on to the more hands-on part of our presentation with the 5 concrete initiatives that could be used to increase the adaptability of the postal enterprise. I will let my colleague Pierre Tasha take over from here. He will expertly take you through these 5 initiatives. Pierre?
Thank you, Benny. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Going on to the next slide, the 5 initiatives we're going to present are aimed to help postal operators better adapt to variability. In the previous slides, Bernard introduced the principal sources of variability, and we also discussed that generally, postal operators tend to overbuild their capacity into what we call a static network. This is encountered throughout the postal enterprise, in sort centers, transportation, and in delivery operations. Obviously, when demand is not aligned to capacity, we encounter an imbalance, which either results in underutilized resources or, on the flip side, with overtime labor or unprocessed mail that fails to meet its service standards. This imbalance has serious cost consequences that are further exacerbated by variability in demand. Consequently, postal operators must implement measures to reduce that imbalance, which is to adapt processing capacity to demand by maintaining a network-wide view of the processing resources in order to better utilize them. So the first initiative we'd like to discuss is the Hold and Sort initiative. It is one of the initiatives that helps deal with this imbalance. The good news are that inventory is your friend and that you can use it to your advantage. So a Hold and Sort initiative means that you can selectively hold the mail or process it as you see fit. Hold and Sort gives you the ability to either defer or to expedite mail processing, thus enabling you to balance mailer's demand with your own capacity to deliver. Note, I said capacity to deliver to emphasize that the Hold and Store initiative must balance network-wide resources all the way down to the delivery function. Using to your advantage service standards that are unique to each product type, D+1, D+3, etc., you can determine the time available to process and decide whether it's appropriate to sort the mail or whether it's preferred to hold it. Mail can be held for as little as few hours to as much as days, as long as it gets delivered within the service standards. So by doing so, you will see a reduction in the cost impacts of variability because the Hold and Sort will allow you to increase transport effectiveness, optimize machine utilization in sort centers, or increase the density of mail delivered to a group of addresses. This will improve the economics of delivery that we will discuss shortly. The implementation of Hold and Sort has multiple consequences. We advise that you establish a mail piece identification scheme. The scheme represents critical mail data to perform the Hold and Sort at the piece level if necessary. But in addition to information encoded on the mail itself, Hold and Sort can also be used with advanced ship notices from mailers. These advanced notices, or manifests, are submitted by mailers before they tender the mail to allow you to make Hold and Sort decisions when their mail is inducted. You may also introduce a mail product with flexible service commitment. For example, the service commitment may range anywhere from D+1 to D+5. In return for this flexible commitment, mailers may enjoy a rate discount, and you may use that flexibility to your advantage when making Hold and Sort decisions. Of course, tools such as distributed management tools need to be implemented to provide you with the capability of making Hold and Sort decisions and dynamic routing decisions, which I'll present next. And finally, mail staging technology would need to be implemented. This technology is quite common in the industry, ranging from tray handling systems to more advanced systems that move individual mail pieces either to a holding buffer or to its next sort destination. This technology is increasingly common and has been implemented in posts in Europe, Asia, and North America. Moving on to dynamic routing, another initiative. The strength, but also the complexity of the postal network is that it is a grid of connected sort centers that help you route mail and parcels as you see fit. With the right information management systems and the right decision support tools, you may make routing decisions to help you mitigate the predictable variability of seasonal and day-of-the-week mail, but also to mitigate the usually unpredictable variability that comes with large mailings. So how can dynamic routing be accomplished? Well, two key measures can be implemented. Firstly, distribution programs can be adapted to redirect mail from one center to another. And secondly, transportation can be coordinated to induct the mail at the right time in the right quantity to the rerouted sort center. Dynamic routing requires that you remain fully aware of the processing capacity available to you at all times in each sort center in the network. Many postal operators have actually implemented network control centers to gain that visibility and to make the right routing decisions. These network control centers do not need to be very technologically complex, and some postal operators have very effectively used daily teleconferencing calls and dashboard reporting of performance metrics to implement dynamic routing. The benefits are that it helps you leverage your underutilized processing capacity, and it helps you adapt to the different sources of variability, especially unexpected events such as plant shutdowns. And also, dynamic routing helps you influence the flow of mail to the right point and at the right time in the network, thus consolidating mail streams to reduce operating costs and improve efficiency. Decision makers who are responsible for running mail across the postal network must be provided with the right tools to balance the mail workload throughout the network, to quickly invoke sort plans when they are needed, or even construct new sort plans if necessary, and to evaluate transport needs on an ongoing basis and adjust them to meet requirements in the network. I mentioned earlier that the variability due to seasonal effects or day-of-the-week effects is fairly well predictable. It is thus quite feasible to develop the methods and the tools needed to adapt dynamic routing for seasonal and day-of-the-week variability before proceeding with more real-time dynamic routing adjustments. The key is to capture, organize, and manage the data about your business, whether it's data generated by mailers or by the sort centers or even by third-party partners like transport contractors. But what is of equal importance is that you need to set up a very flexible organization to create a company culture that understands the value of collaborating and of working together to achieve company-wide performance objectives. Our next initiative, Delivery Point Economics, we propose it as a response to the declining density of mail delivered at every address point, as we presented earlier with the USPS illustration. In the past, postal enterprises were driven by their universal service obligation to construct delivery routes that visited every business or residential address every day. The universal service obligation, as it has generally been implemented, is no longer sustainable. Today, because of substitution and increased competition from private carriers, you need to rethink your delivery strategy. Delivery Point Economics suggests that you concentrate on maximizing mail delivered at every address. That is, maximizing the density of mail delivered per address. This initiative is closely tied to the hold and sort initiative. You could selectively decide when to deliver mail by holding it until it is due. Or you could promote new products that offer flexible time commitments to help increase mail density at a destination address. In other words, these products can be held until mail density at an address justifies their delivery. By adopting delivery point economics, you no longer need to consider intermittent delivery, such as the 5-day delivery versus 6-day, or the every other day delivery. As a matter of fact, with delivery point economics, you can adopt an any day delivery position. Mail is delivered to any address, any day, as long as it is economically justifiable and only when it is due for delivery. The implementation of this initiative is rather high in terms of information requirements, but the capabilities needed are manageable, mostly because they are not new, especially in the private carriers industry, where they have been adopted for some time already. Firstly, the implementation of delivery point economics requires item-level identification. All mail must not be regarded as identical. On the contrary, each item must be treated according to its revenue level and service standards in order to achieve high delivery point economics. Also, smart network and delivery planning tools must be adopted. These must treat a postal zone as an ensemble of connected routes that can be disassembled and recombined as needed to increase the density of mail delivered on the resulting route. But in addition to high information requirements, the Delivery Point Economics Initiative also requires a high degree of operational flexibility. Namely, the staging of mail must be facilitated to promote mail density at an address, as we discussed earlier in the Hold and Sort initiative. And also, the delivery workforce must be able to operate in crews. Crew members can collaborate, exchange route segments, and adapt their team size to the delivery workload, all to provide a high level of adaptability and to reduce operating costs. The upside of delivery point economics is substantial. It encourages you to adopt a strong information management discipline coupled to high operational flexibility. Next, yield management is a technique designed to identify excess capacity within a determined period of time and induce customers to buy a company's services by offering discounts. This technique is used extensively by airlines and hotels, which have learned to maximize the number of booked seats or rooms. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with yield management on airlines. Rates can be higher on holidays, for instance, and lower in between. United Airlines has about 30 booking codes. 13 of those are for restricted coach fare, each with its own characteristic. A certain number of seats are reserved for each booking code with their own price. The amount of available seats and the corresponding fare in each booking code category is carefully examined and adjusted periodically in order to fill seats and maximize revenues. Well, the same principle can be applied to postal operators who have, on the short term, a fixed processing and delivery capability. Instead of applying to individual passengers, the principle of postal yield management applies to mailers. During low-volume days of the week or month, mailers will be offered discounts as an incentive to create more mail. Because the discounts are based on available network capacity, including processing and delivery capacity, it is also possible to couple the notion of yield management with dynamic routing by providing discounts for inducting mail at the most convenient time and most convenient entry point in the network. Mail may be routed in a more circuitous way, taking advantage of available transportation and processing capacity, and would be discounted accordingly. This idea is similar to lower airline fares for passengers willing to stop at multiple airports. Unlike airline passengers, postal mailings require several weeks to be created and produced. As a result, yield management rates must be prepared well in advance or must be prepared using historical information combined with forecasted volume. This requires good costing and yield management models, and most likely a mail reservation system to ensure that capacity is not given away at highly discounted price. Of course, the yield management approach implies that the postal operators have pricing flexibility and are allowed to offer discounts for advertising mail, for example. Because yield management is not real-time program, information requirements are moderate. Good to historical averages can be used by the postal operator, must have a good sense of what the real capacity of its processing and delivery networks are. And finally, advanced labor management initiatives. As we all know, postal enterprises are labor intensive. Labor costs are often fixed and are not generally aligned to the workload, let alone to the variability in that workload. Advanced labor management initiatives can help you become more adaptable and help you transition from a mostly fixed cost environment to a mostly variable cost operation. Multiple methods can be considered. Crew scheduling. It consists of assigning variable size crews to jobs in sort centers based on the variable workloads. The same can be done with delivery operations, where the crew sizes can be adapted to zones of varying size. Job bidding can be designed to maximize flexibility in assigning staff to jobs and to shifts. And variable labor assignment allows staff to serve multiple workstations or work centers, again, based on the variability of the workload. The key is that you implement initiatives that fully utilize the flexibility that exists in your labor force in order to adapt to variability and reduce operating costs. You could consider many options to implement variable labor management. Some of the actions include setting up agreements with labor organizations to affect the work assignment. The key is to rely more heavily on part-time or flexible labor in order to increase adaptability. Working with labor organizations, you could, for instance, implement innovative solutions such as breaking shifts into shorter segments and scattering them throughout a 24-hour period. For example, shifts would be 4-hour long instead of 8-hour long and would be spread throughout a 24-hour period. Other actions include developing an integrated labor and operating planning system. This is a planning tool that helps managers and supervisors make staffing decisions based on the projected workload. The tool can provide supervisors with increased ability to adapt. For instance, the arrival times of staff can be spread over multiple hours. The end times can also vary. Underutilized staff can be switched between work centers. The key, again, is to fully utilize the flexibility that exists in your labor force. The information requirements are thus fairly demanding because you must have a good understanding of the work rules, the labor cost per task, and the productivity by work center. Additionally, volumes must be projected over the short to medium term with enough precision to adapt labor as necessary. With this, I'll pass the mic to Benny, who will be sharing some closing remarks before we open the floor to questions and answers. Thank you.
Chair, thank you. And I will now basically summarize in this slide the points that we made throughout this presentation. And in the next slide, I will cover some next steps that you may want to consider as you move towards increasing the adaptability of your postal operation. Variability is regarded as a significant issue in the commercial sector and in the retail industry in particular. Cost reductions through agility and adaptability in respective supply chains can significantly improve competitiveness. However, the complexity and interconnectivity of the postal network has made it more difficult for postal operators to adapt their networks to changing mail volumes and mix. There are different opportunities to adapt this postal network to changes in mail. There are significant opportunities, to adapt this postal network to changes in mail volumes and mix over the long term, the medium term, and in the short term. These changes affect primarily the infrastructure, the distribution, and the delivery areas of the postal enterprise. Moving to an adaptable post requires operators to leverage available information in their enterprise. Historical information to forecast longer-term trends, advanced network simulation models, access to mailer data to perform advanced planning and evaluate alternative routes, and ultimately provide real-time decision support to maintain operational control. Next steps. The first step a postal operator should consider is to perform a comprehensive diagnostic in your own postal enterprise to determine how adaptable your operation is. How often do you adapt your infrastructure or your distribution plan? And do you have the proper tools and methods to address each type of variability? Once this diagnostic is performed and you have a good idea of how the enterprise deals with this question of variability, you can start to put together a roadmap that will get you on your way to turning your operation into a more adaptable, more agile one. This includes gaining a better understanding of how variability in mail volume and mixes affect your operation, and then identify and prioritize initiatives such as the one that we presented today that will save you the most money and will increase your overall adaptability. Finally, you will need to acquire the data and the tools and also develop the skills that will enable you to put these initiatives in place. And that concludes our formal presentation today. So we will now take a look to see if there are questions.
I think that postal organizations have understood that they have to become more nimble or adaptable, and are taking a host of measures. As Benny introduced the different sources of variability, a lot of postal, if not all, have already adapted to the longer-term trend by rationalizing their networks. They probably continue to struggle in terms of becoming more adaptable to what is tactical or shorter window of variability caused by seasonal fluctuation, day of the week fluctuations, etc. This is not a new source of variability to the postal operators. They've always been exposed to that kind of variability. What probably makes the complexity harder is the fact that the trends in decline are somewhat harder to predict and therefore have an impact also on seasonal and day of the week variability. But in terms of, back to your exact question, responding to that variability or the adaptability per se, I would say that it varies. We have, a very broad range of postal organizations of varying degrees of sophistication. But if we focus on the quote-unquote more advanced posts, they have become more knowledge-driven organizations that are learning to mine their data, interpret the information, and respond to it. This is a general answer to say that I think they're moving in the right course, but that there might be quite a bit of work to do. And as a matter of fact, and I'll close here, none of the ideas we're presenting here are new, so to speak. They're all derived from observations we've had about some initiatives undertaken by Post here and there.
Yeah, would just add to your answer that we've recently done a study of leading trends in logistics and leading developments in the logistics field, outside of the postal field. And clearly in the logistics field and the retail industry, the drive towards adaptability is a lot stronger and a lot more advanced than we have seen in the postal world. I think that it's driven mainly by competitiveness, one retailer wanting to be more advanced, faster, more responsive, and cheaper, because as we know, if we are online buying something, a few cents may make a difference as to whether we're going to buy from one person or the other. So squeezing cost out of the supply chain is extremely important. And so these companies have learned to implement these some very similar initiatives to the one that we've presented today in order to squeeze dollars and cents out of each supply chain. And they've done so also, I think, in an environment that requires them to talk to and exchange information with other stakeholders. For instance, the manufacturers. The retailers must talk to the manufacturers and must talk to the third-party logistics providers in order to coordinate their supply chain, which is a little bit more complicated than what the postal operators have to deal with on a daily basis. So that's it. I would like to thank you for joining us. As I said, the material for this presentation will be available online in a couple of days, and we will notify you on how to access this material. I would also encourage you to participate in our next webinar, which will take place on March the 21st in about 3 weeks. At that time, Jean-Philippe Ducasse, a former revenue leakage specialist with the UPU, and Chris Patterson, an economist from Australia, who's done a lot of work with the Australian Post, will discuss the state-of-the-art in postal revenue leakage prevention. In the meantime, please feel free to contact us if you have any thoughts or comments about the material that was presented today. And I'd like to thank you again and hope that we will see you again soon. Bye-bye.